Okay guys, real quick before I start, I just want to say that this video was recorded about 2 weeks ago before I got like your feedback for the other tutorial and stuff. I was also on a break, so I wanted to wait until the break was over before I put out this video so I actually had content. Anyway, on with the video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your own 2D platformer controller. To start, all you need to do is open up a new Unity 2D scene. Right click in the hierarchy, and then hover over 2D object, and then sprite. Now there's nothing rendering now because no sprite is selected. You can use any sprite you want to, but for this example, I'm just going to use a square. Make sure that the sprite you want to use has texture type 2D and UI. Go to your new sprite, and then drag in that sprite. Reset the transform, and then you should be able to see it right there. Now we will rename this to the player. And we will add a component, and this will be a circle collider. Make sure it is 2D, and then hit enter. Now if you go to the scene view, you can see this faint green outline right here. If I make this a darker color, you should be able to see it easier. Now what we need to do is add a rigid body 2D. What this component will do is it will basically do all of the physics calculations for you. That way you don't need to write it all yourself in a script. Freeze the rotation on the Z-axis. Also make the collision detection continuous. Now you can minimize these by clicking the little arrow in the left of their name. Now we will add another component. This one will be the script that controls the player. We will call this script player movement. Click new script and create an add. Double click on the script to open it up in Visual Studio. Once Visual Studio opens up, we can start coding. We can delete the start function, and we will start by adding some variables. Add a public float called speed. We will add another variable called isGrounded. It is a bool, and we will add one more variable called jump force. Now we can save that. Always make sure to save, otherwise if Visual Studio crashes or something, you'll lose all your progress, which is not super fun. In the update, we can type in isGrounded is equal to physics2d.overlapCircle. Now, what this variable does is it checks whether your feet are touching the ground. That way, if you're jumping, you won't be able to jump a second time unless you've already touched the ground again. So what we need to do is we need to add a few more variables. We need to add a public transform, and we will call this ground check. We will add another variable called ground distance. And we will add one last variable, and this is just to make sure that when you check for the ground, it's actually checking for only the ground. Now in this we just need to type in all of those in this order. And make sure that after the first one you do dot position, because it's a transform. Now to explain this line of code, isGrounded is a bool. That means that you touching the ground can either be true or false. What this does is it sees if this is true, then this must be equal to true, and vice versa. It overlaps a circle at this position and this big, and it checks for whatever this mask includes. Now later on we are going to add a jump using this variable, but right now we're going to add a little bit of movement. So move down 2, and we are going to type in transform dot position plus equals new vector 2 input dot get axis horizontal times, and how you do times is with the little star, which is shift 8 speed. Now after this you do comma, and then all you have to do is copy this, what you put in before, and paste it, and then all you have to do is replace horizontal with vertical. and then end it with a semicolon. Now, I'll just explain this line of code. Transform.position is basically your current position in X, Y, and Z values. Plus equals means every single frame, because this is in the update, it will add on whatever this value is on the right. New vector 3. A vector 3 is just a list of 3 different number values, like transform.position. The first value is always X, the second value is always Y, and the third value is always Z. Now what this is, input.getAxis, that is using Unity's input system to check the value of a certain button. But this is horizontal, which means it is A and D, or left and right. Now we will multiply this value by speed, because the horizontal will always be equal to 1, 0, or -1, 1 being right, 0 being no movement at all, or -1 being left. Also, if you have an analog controller or something like that, then it will be any value in between those. Now, I actually made a mistake right here. Instead of just copying that, we will actually make this 0. And you'll see why soon. But now, if we just go into Unity, let's shrink down the player a little bit. Let's bring it down to 0.1. Now, we will make the speed. That will be equal to 5. We will right-click on the player and then click Create Empty. And we can call this the ground check. Drag that into the ground check variable. Make the ground distance something like 0.01. And make the jump force maybe 2. We will also add a layer and call it ground. Right click in the hierarchy again, create a 2D object and then sprite, and we can call this ground. Reset the transform, and then find a sprite you want to use, and we will make this green for like grass or something. Let's move it down and scale it up. And what we also want to do is we want to add a box collider. Now if we click play, okay, now that was really fast. We went off screen pretty quickly. So let's make the speed more like 0.5. Okay, so we fall down with gravity because of the rigid body. And now we can go left or right with the arrow keys or A and D. Now that is still a very fast speed. So we are going to make it 0.05. Let's try that. Okay, that's a much better speed. And it's constant too. Now, we still can't jump yet, and the camera can't follow us, so we want to add those two. We need to add a if statement, and we will do if is grounded. Add some curly brackets and hit enter. Now, we want to check if is grounded, you should be able to jump. We want to do input.get key down, add parentheses, and then type in key code, and then dot, and then put whatever key you want, and we are just going to do W. So this if statement checks if the button you press down is W. So every time you press it down, this will be true. Curly brackets and then enter. And now, before we continue with this, just add one more variable, and type in private rigid body 2D, and then call it RB. Now we will add a void awake and do RB is equal to get component rigid body 2D. Put parentheses and then put a semicolon. And then do RB dot add force. And then you have to put a vector 2. So we will do new vector 2. Add parentheses, type in 0 because we don't want it to add any left or right force. We only want it to be vertical. And then we will do jump force. And then just put a semicolon. Okay, now that should be pretty good. But before we leave, we want to add a new void, and it will be on draw gizmos. And what we want to do is we want to make a circle in the exact shape as the ground check. That way we can see it in the inspector. So we want to type in gizmos dot draw wire sphere, do parentheses, and then type in the same parameters except for the ground mass. So ground check dot position, ground distance. End it with a semicolon, and that's all. So we need to hit Control S to save, and we can go back to the editor. What we need to do is go to the scene view, zoom in, and right now that is the size of the ground check, so we want to make it larger with ground distance. That's what that variable is for. And all we have to do is move this down until it's just poking out like that much. Okay, now before we start, all we have to do is change the layer of the ground to, well, ground. We also need to add a rigid body 2D to the ground and make the gravity 0 and change the position and make the position and rotation locked. Okay, now I forgot to say, but you need to add a comma after the new vector 2 in add force and type in force mode 2D dot impulse. Now you can see if we press the jump button, it jumps. Now that value is obviously way too high, so we have to turn that down. It's 2 right now, so we'll make it 0.1. Okay, now that's kind of low, so we can make it 0.5. That might be good. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Now we have a nice jump. We can move left, right, and all that. Please watch this video. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and the bell icon if you want to keep seeing more of my videos. This tutorial was kind of short, and I'll probably make another one for the camera so that the camera follows the player. But anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.